Well, we've made it. Week 13. Online tutorial number 13. And so what else could there be that you could be thinking about? Surely you've got your finishing up. You've either submitted or you're in the process of submitting your final learning report. And you've got enough instruction on that out there now. And the other tutorials, I won't go back and rehash. Other than the obvious things. Don't make it any harder for yourself than it has to be. You really are just trying to tell me how you now reach out and find things that are quite invisible, right? It's almost like you're looking for the cow to bring it in and make it a part of your final thinking. And I say final thinking in a way that I don't mean for you to move on and leave behind what we've just done in the unit. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But let me just go back to that final thinking. Energy and coactions, I'm testing you. I'm trying to see if you can see beyond the obvious, to bring things in, even hypothetically, I'm happy with that, where you can imagine the creation of new value. And if you can imagine the creation of new value, then that in itself should lead to you being able to explain why this revised CPS statement is now compelling than where you were 5 weeks ago. Okay? And that's the crux of what you're trying to do in that report. Obviously, we've talked enough about the challenge of you being an honest witness. And I've asked you and I've challenged you in the class and in other online tutorials to make sure that you take the time to reflect on what's happened in this unit. Now, one of the important ways you can do that process of reflecting is you can fill in the teacher survey, right? You can make sure that you go along, hopefully rate the unit fantastic, but that's entirely your call, obviously. But think about what you've gained from the unit. Low cognitive load. What does that mean for you? What has it meant for you to be able to just have one body of knowledge with many integrated bits that you've had an opportunity to start to play with and make sense of how do these things relate to each other? If I change this assumption, what does it mean for some of the other assumptions I hold in other parts of that framework? My challenge to you is to take advantage of this. If you've engaged in the unit in the desired way, if you've got something from this process in terms of the theory at this stage, that means that at this point in time you have committed something into your brain, something that can be drawn back as easily as me showing you this image, right? When I show you that image, you know what it is, right? Because it was already there in the back of your brain and it could be recalled, right? Walking down the street and asking yourself a question when you see a business that's closed. I wonder why that business closed. Did it have enough legitimacy? What type of selective factors were working against it? I wonder if they tried to tap into any energy. What sort of energy could a business like that have tapped into? Those three questions are enough to keep this thing in the back of your mind active and working through, so that it's always there to be recalled as and when needed, so that you can solve other tasks with that working memory, because you've now got something waiting on cue in your memory, your long-term memory. That's what we've been trying to achieve this semester. So don't waste the opportunity. Don't give yourself a chance to forget over time the things that we've done. Practice them. As you're walking around, practice them. You might notice the shirt I'm wearing today. I very proudly wear this shirt because as somebody who's learnt a lot on the streets, Sesame Street was one of my saviours growing up. There's a lot that we can learn on the streets. Your learning isn't confined to a classroom. You can learn by asking questions. Every time you walk down the street, you can find things to analyze and to muse about, and just to simply question, right? To keep that framework active in your mind. Okay? So that's the first part. The second part is that, as much as it may have been difficult for you along the way, I've challenged you to ask yourself why. Don't give up using why. There's always an explanation that sits below the surface. And as you know, our mind will always want us to stay on the surface, because that's the most efficient space for our mind to operate at. Take away the complexity of our life and just default to what seems to work more often than not. But more often than not won't let us self-analyze to the level that we need to develop that critical self-awareness from which true conviction comes from. That's the challenge for you. Don't rest. Don't be happy with, that's how I always tend to think about these things. Ask yourself why. And keep asking yourself why. You don't have to use the 7 supporting questions all the time. There's no need for that all the time. That's really just to develop a capacity within you, a realization in you, that you can find a deeper level of thinking about yourself and the world that you interact with. So you've got 2 mechanisms: why and the environmental interaction framework. They're so simple and so small in terms of your ability to almost put them in your back pocket and just wander down the street with them, right? But the challenge for you in leaving this unit is keeping them fresh and keeping them alive in your everyday life. And if you do that, I'm confident that you'll take from this unit something that you can use over and over and over again into the future, something that will reward you on a constant basis. And that is my hope for you. That was the entire design of the unit. As uncomfortable and difficult and confusing as it seemed from time to time, my hope was that you would be able to develop a conviction about who you are and what you believe, and more often than not, what you want to do. And you would be able to balance that against a deeper level of perception of the world that exists around you, because you're able to ask those particular questions, right? The questions that relate to the environmental interaction framework. Because it's all about you, right? What type of resource profile do you have relative to something that you want to do? To what extent does there exist legitimacy around that? How does this space that you're trying to influence change via variation, selection, retention? If you're going to bring value to someone, who's that value for? Are there people that you can work with in a cooperative way to develop some form of sustainable coaction? Should you just test this water in like an R strategist? Or should you be trying to scale up and show a commitment for the long term? Right? Are you something for everyone or something for just a few? And most importantly, what about the energy that you could tap into? Finding sources of energy from that ecological environment that surrounds you from one moment to another moment, and being aware of those selective forces that may be working against you. To the extent that you can see yourself as the idea, as the focus of potential selection for or against in the activities that you want to live, you are set. You're set to roll forward. So, good luck. I'm never too far away. If you ever need to have a chat about your idea, about your development, if you need a reference for a job, all of those sorts of things, you know where to find me. I'm not a hard person to find. And I'd love to hear from you on Facebook, on Twitter, LinkedIn. It's just Tasdevil Cole. You'll find me on all of those things, right? I love to stay in touch with students. I love to see how their lives develop. I would love for you to develop into a reasonable adventurer. That's entirely up to you in terms of the motivations that you have. But I've given you two tools, asking why and using the environmental interaction framework, that you can mentally cope with and work with and help to develop your sense of place in the world as you see fit to engage with it. All the best. And as I've said before, we're still trying to develop this process. We know it's not perfect, and we would love to have your feedback. The more feedback we can get in terms of the extent to which it isn't working for you, it makes it much easier for us to make the case that, no, look, okay, someone may not have liked something we've done, but look, other people did like it. So, you've got the survey link in front of you. It'd be great if you could jump on there and let us know how the unit worked for you. All the best. You know where to find me. It's been a joy being able to work with you guys. It's always a privilege to have a moment in your lives, and I wish you all the best going forward. Cheers.